Yanze jembor zordan yingmi jang zoner monum jembor nga gyada. Dakar dargam zando shirmar tomba tuje janla ge jam zar janrawar zergi jangamsa jawar tuji shandar yilla. Jime banzo janlak zoran de gongje toban bhavara shinji lo gongje toban bhavara shinji. Gongje toban bhavara shinji lo
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it, and vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate the supreme bodhicitta. Well, the long is a little bit longer today. And the class will resume on Friday or not. I'm not quite sure yet. I will make an announcement accordingly.
Salanko ne nyangi so tenip jongden de kim chem jand shanju sanwa te daglander kchip ka za do rigiwe kich jiv jirde salanko tenga te da qasura jongden de da jongna legi je pa de da dan bar da cha kam thongwa lakso jongden de ki kar zara rigiwe te tevjin shapa mar mem za yongsim nyang len de ne ti song la shirza jiv java churma wa jiv shongwa ti de ki ma de te 대천 찻 대천 찻 대천 찻의 기대기 남양 상계 맘통 남양 상집기 셈마니도 고종다 당연전 마니도 르기베 대등이 상집을 라양도 버지유경 거랍성 본들라 대정 쇼바 강덕음 좀 타마 제디 제디 제데머티 졸업소바 도버죠로 대신초 Kara changme baksam giblana me bayan dobar zoba shangchibdum gombar zobar san givaran girdo rikjiva dewe nam shangchib sanwa dedak rikam shangchib sanwam tongni shangchib sanwam tongni sem girzam sambar mafshar dev dakchakam churten nam devjinda devjang shabam tongo dakchakam danna san givjikso nyamdo sambo rikjiva karte dedakab shangchib sanwa chimbom churten gi indashi sama devjang shabam dashi makto bar indashi gzam kibra mafshago gzanda kirnam shangchib sanwa Dagni larma shungren gyoro tela gongde tevjang soba manchikbe tegdam jiba karte dak sem tangbo kiba shangchib sen hwa te sang jiji ndashi mapkid ba ngin jiktin kam khudame ba namna kang da jiba sang jibchong dande tamchin la libar kirchig jibsha ba yano rikiba dak shime diji zirngab jatama gangsida zong de tobo dangen zeng de tober jera de da tamje jang de jang shopim te toberan jera de rigi ba de tabe na da la chu zur ma ba marnin ba jo ba de de jang shopber pon oren gerdo rigi ba kan da sji semjin jirtir mu ba jirtir mu ba jang de jang shopber chu tom ba de tamchin na de jang shopim te yo no kor kan da shang chu sa we ta ba jang da gaji garpa zang ji shi de tamam chema la Xi Lugba Te Tam Chida Jiang Dev Jiang Shapim Tar Shibira Shawa Yin Na De La Mablum Bo Shangzib Sanhua Mayin Ba Shangzib Sanhua Ken Che Wa Shangzib Sanhua Sim Jimbir Jira Ba Churka Ba Tsurin Chu Ba Chu Gang Ambar Shoba Te Tak Kachigin Dir Kichin Dir Tava Chig Chiji Zir Dir Tava Chig Shi Zir Zero Shamba Nge Shangzib Jib shoba na dang ji gang zib joba new ba na rang ge li yong so tong wa dang chong ma yong so dang wa dang wo mo yong so dang wa dang jia chi de yong so dang we new jiang xian ba le ber she bi zib joba ji gi shir dan zang wo long shin de new ber ngi mu ber chan na de de ni ba dang ge de zhi ji sang jie dang zha wi gan de Jor Masimso, Mabamba, Dok, Chuji, Tsurndo, Zonwayam, Joradan Dambeni, Gemmer Dambeni, Niba Mayon, Mabambangim, Mumber Zober San Gene, San Gigi, Shiji, Kantamba, Dirkut, Tena Lom Nubra, Shava Mayono, Jizerte, Semjan Dedom, Joma Mayim, Beniba Chimbo, Churter, Dambala, Tu, Mabamba, Gerlon, Chuter, Nambra Topa, Do, Stomber Tante Santa Jukita, Tirtavian, Zikirne, Cho. Kamchugo zam cha zam la ragaba nambra thagaba zun bo gelon nam lam gumbra magaja Number tabalar kyun do bar ta chur mu de dogna churma yo gönlon aşkıran de bayano sanki churpon wayano lumsim chimbur kıran de bayende semjan nyarvar kiva de dogna labr shiba jingamar mago di chivjir jena kanka churma number mu ba de dogna sanki number mu ba chular number mu ba kangda churma yo rum me ba de dogna sanki rum me bayano kangda churma wa marnim bar joba de dogna sanki tomur mandot bayanna sanki la marnim ba joba yano 강다가 샘당볼 기비상 주선 화라 공초버 샘기바 대덕나 상디 용속 동화연대 저니드 공초버 샘기브르 제바 대니기 가로 샘장녀라네 바고 고첩구고소 저잠도 공초베 먹었다가 대쳤다 롱위 김치도 도버는 여러하고 대저잠들 님버 줘봐 대저들지 김치도 맷버 도버는 여러면 범바들 다위상 주상와 나나노 버선 무슨 기비상 주상와 송동주와 로버통은 여리 주대 다반하잔 네 맘통소 마범바 상주 샘진진의 주진의 시라네 바남나 레 문버는도 샤와 요때 먹먹발라메도 상주상화 강도 주타도 시장돈바대도라는 주발라네 바예노 마범바 상주상화 남기 바로도 신바지 양도 버르주바는 상주상 상집 샘기 쉬르 상집 기쉬르 연나 대양 물론본데다 그 시르기 바로도 신바코나 상주상화 러버셔와 지저장 바로도 신바 당만 넘섬전도 마범바지 냠도 셈 가지기 절복강 임빔 고심버 결와티 차르비 쉬르 연남 소르와 존던데 되는 말럭소 가서라 마범방이 바로도 신바 트던담빔도 강도 담바데 동노 상주 도버는 결와 연낙소라 정든데 장집 도버는 저와 나가서 장집 과스라마 범바 규지 거라 주주 준비 바로도 준비 거라 주주 쓰름기 바로도 준비 거라 주주 소비 바로도 준비 거라 주주 손지기 바로도 준비 자다 바 거라 주주 상던기 바로도 준비 자 대람름본도 건들다 때 먹이베 쓰르지 비상집 토보시 저르데 대도는 쇼바용서 마다바 즉잠기 가버 심심 주비님 버시바 마인데 ngqal hırlimbe nan rawainde chogdugjanda gerwada chogbrane chogbar nganibadan niedala dawa yeno mabamba kangyam gobjimba la gawa zamdan kurlek yuru Verdiatra Tobena Mayana Telam Lumbo, Zanzan la Serna Shibate, Janji Kimson Dong in the Cut of Shanjib Dirter Shodon, the Shanjib San Hushobatene, and Donna Zurlo, Janatsur Mayano, Chugitsan Donna Jurma Parjevik, and Shizo Gizer de Nipa of Kurtisha, the Jurma Tetolakan, and Narsimba Mumbonjo, Mabamba, John Sova, and Sova Janji Madeta, Karaja, Jan Tambizoba Tobranga Marmana, Janjur Mujan, Chogu. 마밤바 요아당담바라 션치 메도 차도잔라 메도 럼조 메발라 메도 양덕베 시발라 메베데 김섬버 시발라 메도 니즈 쇼발라 메도 마밤바 물lum보 데더라 니 시르비 겸 케버은 켄지비요 냥투지 조성 랑지르지 조강 연비 조데더나 대정성벽 동방 마이 노지 제로 대립 정던데기 제던담바 람줄 라카르사라 람주로 니스메 발랍슈비 시르비 바르도 심바 요드모독 소라 정던데 테르럭서 카사라 람주로 망네 발랍션집 토보 모동 소라 정던데 테르럭서 카사라 람주 주바메 버션집 요드모 대 소라 정던데 테르럭서 카사라 람주 니들라데 비 시르드 오사메 바테도 건더타 고르보티로 리기 넘버 멤버처 용수 종으로 셈발라투 마밤바 잔잔주선 회 주담지 냥투지 추조지 저버럼 마샤 고 주담제 랑지지 추조지 저버럼 마샤 주담지 산지지 추조지 저버럼 마샤 몸브르 젬버 마샤 주담제 냥투지 추 마요노지 저버럼 마샤 주담제 랑산지지 추 마요노지 저버럼 마샤 주담제 주담제도 산지지 추 마요노지 저버럼 마샤 몸브르 젬버 마샤 주담제 소수기 추지 저버럼 마샤 주담제 소기 추 마요노지 저버럼 마샤 주담제 근내 뇨모 추 제적부르마샤오 주담지 근내 뇽몽바 메비 주지 적부르마샤오 주담지도 넘버 셴위 추지 적부르마샤오 주담지 넘버 셴 메비 주지 적부르마샤오 주담지 렘바 니어 렘비 주지 적부르마샤오 주지 주담지도 니어 렘바 메비 주지 적부르마샤오 주담지 샤당 주비 주지 적부르마샤오 주담지 샤 메비 주지 적부르마샤오 주담지 sarva chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak sarva mayimbi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chado chibi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak chiba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak semji chuji chaparma shawa chudam sem mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak sembi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak semba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak legi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak legi chu le mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak nambar mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak nambar meba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak zobi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak zoba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak thari chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak tharo mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak rnamjur ji chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak rnamjur mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak bhagbi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak bhagba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak semjin ji chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak semjin mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak zong chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak zong mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak dembi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak demba mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak sarjin ji chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak sarjin mebi chuji chaparma shawa chudam dembi chuji chaparma shawa chudam chak demba mebi chudam chak dembi chuji chaparma shawa ma phan ba nge shang chab nyambo chu ni de ngom bro zo bro shang chur de chu ji yer tam chim tian jiang mo ba ma yo no chudam ji ji ngo ni de geng dam tian jiang ngom bro jing bi jing ten jikten ji chu na mar ton do shang chu san hui chu la chu ji no 토브르샤 당 zon당 추 집셔전 남기 비셔등에 대비전 녀더 남버 찌바메 바 추남 서와 마시 바 저버 마시 바 마반방에 알랑지 알랑 바 쳔본 지든 지컴더 고문 지네 에 만처더 추 담비 셈전 남란더 따더 대비전 서바나 더 코나라 추톤도 냐모 대비전도 자르데 알랑 Vijibag Nibadan, Devjan the Tons and Morton, Jinjin Gikams, Chutan Bizis and Janalander Yamda, Devjan Shaban of the Konala Churton, Don, the Devjan Shabichu, Don, and Devjan Shabi. Tieso, under the Chujin Korlo Koro, Chujin Korlo Korne, Chu, Tondo, Nyamo, Mapamban, Tavandi, Jitin Gikam, Thais, and Memepata, Nadu Tikitseang, Churton Janter, the San Jim Zabam Zato, Nyama. Nima Kung Tiki Under Tarta Sanji Chu, Sanji Jim Zapamzado, Shiju Tiki Under Tarta Sanji Jim Zapamzado, Chutam Chetan, Simson Tamchetan, Jin Kam Tamchet, Dejan Sobakian, Toba Mamga Zubadan, Sheriff Dan Yishil Zuban Jurte, Terta Sanji, some Jimmy Chipasa Mepana, Tera Teta, Terta Churpungana, Nevision to San Juan. Shantu San Juan de Lana, Flapper Sharton de Lana, Flapper Mashawaji, Zerte, Gansa, Chupon, Nebate dans la Santier, Coran de Balani, Bada, quand Santier, Coran de Nebate dans l'Undertate. Nansungo, rien ça, la Nebate, dans le Chuki Pumbre Tirvena, Neba Yono, Mapamba Tertavena, Tejan Shabatalam Kebichu, la Dog Chumur Shawo, Tina Jahujan, dans Shantu San Juan. 上主神话写入的蓬勃扬道不然这把当上主神话同啊同等上主神话，修的不把那不一比罗主当上主神话现在那不一比什么东北罗主当上主神话写入不把当嘛写入不比嘛当上主神话就是扬道三十的当上主神话找到改变第二波当上主神话看。啊，那把当上主神话上几项太一比丘噶三把当上主神话，下列是往昔当上主神话不叫龙波切当。上主神话，阿郎不及，阿郎不切当上主神话，阿郎不及，阿郎不切。上主神话是这样的，我学当上主神话，只把他们这那不是了，当上主神话总把莫动啊，那把当上主神话用的就用的动件把当上主神话，他们就被一些门把没把，没不是神把当上主神话，就不是这个比多个讲真当上主神话，就他们这里盘毛到把当上主神话，上几节当这了那把当上主神话。咱等几件不是觉得是自己的把那不弄把当上主生活，就天津就不是找把当上主生活。你是不得的个，中等的兰德个读书多，中等的第二老师，对上说吧，第二老的到这讲下手的，三级讲刚刚弄个什么你等去的，中等的啦，你们个个他们去的样，中等的你基础他们人咋多，对上的出经济天气看着，刚那什么其他对上。Devjan de Semjan Namla Churton Bramzato, Jomdan de Dada, Dachaki, the Santi Jang, the Riva Gibana Santi Jana, Mamton Artlarian, Chunyandam Chiso, Tenip Jomdan de Jin, Jaurjun, the Kerala, Quasar and Jap. Ertu dang dev jin shig be yer dang yi shi ter ter tsat me ba dang sam ji ji yer na ter ter sam ji me je ba ter ter dev jin shig ba chu dam ji ji mo ne ba nyam na Jahur delar ki lumbu de dagnan dirkat ndirtar te janzu san hua namji devjan shabi sho shirab shoban shirab ki parut shobago je zero jahur ndirtar te janzu san shoban khod me bi shobago ndirtar te janzu san shoban nyamba me bi shobago ndirtar te janzu san shoban yongsun zamba me bi shobago ndirtar te janzu san shoban mandur shobago janzu san shoban tamji balap ten jan lhabi zamba yongsu tobi shobago janzu san shoban Xian la pang de ba yong su me ju shu ba xiang su sen hua xiang zhi sen hua nam ji shu ba ne yong su de ba de da wen ne ni chu yin na di ce tong ru ge ru ji du jia hu de da wei na ji dan ban ni shi bo de tam ji ji jiang ni xiang zhi ge wa zheng me bu re yang de bu zhe ba ta lam ge ba tam biao zhen ji xi bu ren ji ri chu yang de bu lang wa la ne de wo yo bu xia wo tam ji ba tam bu xia wo chuo me bi sim zu xia wo sim chen Dostarte, Pubo Yansa Chimbo, Malon Russia, Tene Jahur Sora, Jonathan de Churpunga Jiba Kanglo, Jonathan de Quatsara, Jahur, Division Shabakson Babka, Lalan of Zandan de She, Lalan and Amber de Shibana, Churpunga, War. Gand the Churpunga, the Churpunga, Division Shabala, Kuranda Bayana, Gindan La, Ganduba, Dona Ruguba, Dona Rugbago, Dona Murgbago is there nature Ponga, Dona Shanchu Sangwa Namji Cheto Sombago, Dona Yantu Namji Cheto Sombago is there Churpanga, Dona Ransanji Namji Cheto Sombayano, Zerna Churpanga, Dona Shanchu Sangwa Labago, Dona Shanchu Sangwa Laba Mayano is there nature Ponga, Poba Chimbo, Poba Yodo, Poba Medo is there nature Pongayano, Chuna Chumayan Bertonda, Zerna Churpongayano, San Jim Jonga Meberzon, Zong Toba is there nature Pongayano, Zong Tobi Tobana, Yonsa Tabayano is there nature Pongayano, Churmavi Shoba, Nibir Shava Dano is there nature Pongayano, Churma Jabala Pasam Soba Mayan. Noji zerna pong churponga yo no me bra lang na churponga yo no shoba na sholum dia lang na churponga yo no shoba na tsar chme nyam be lang na churponga yo no po ba kurum ma ji ba zerna churponga yo no na lag bar ma shi do ji zerna churponga yo no kong da ma ji bi tsu garwar shi so ji zerna churponga yo no yike meng ge de jang sha bi ka lan ji ko ji zerna churponga yo no dor de ngar shi so ji zerna churponga yo no tsu jaba dang tsu jaba garwar shi so ji zerna churponga yo no ton la mu jang la mamu bo ji zerna churponga yo no chun cha bi tse na tang jan da gir na churponga yo no chuk ma she na churponga yo no kon dor tong na churponga yo no ndala sha na ndar tra ma shi ji zerna churponga yo no ndana ndana rig ndana merg zerna churponga yo no ja khora nyang tu jir po ba kang jal ba dang jan zu zang wa nam jir po ba kang la ba dang yer nye tam chad na de jang so bim to yo no ja khora nge na nyang tu jir po ba kang la ba dang jan zu zang wa nam po ba kang la ba de tam chad jang de jang so bim television mun de mun la bar taba yo no ja khora jang chab de mun la bar taba yo no ndar tar mun bo de ta nga so no jor de ji jin ji la bi jin de la yo kyun do semso devjang shigba nawi chu te de la yang kyun do bar semso ni bi jir na kim chung la ni be devjang shigba tamba chung bi jir de ne ba ma yin ri ba la de be ri la de be jamze dang kim de la yang ma ba nan der ke chu ji lo bar mo so chu ji devjang shigbi ka Lagbar tozo jizerde çok çıkdır me bar jis yaran ve zete tağçur pamurun gelvender tarti ngan son çim burun rovan son burun diyor. Jagurum gumbrjen balap şan çıpıp şu bawo jinga marmago kimla çıbin soğarnan bir tağba jinga marmago nisir tombala çuji pamurun gelvali çuranga marmago. Çıkdır tombala ngan son da çuranga marmago ormaga namla tağba go jinga marmago jagurangi gongol hongo jemani giti çujir go mamıba Chujirgo mangmug bitsir da tono, jawar kongong longo shima niji chujirgo nge amug bitsir di maftan do, jawar nge no stomba nijir namba la kongong longo shima niji chujirgo nam tan do, nge no semchen danda shiba ter nye da chujirgo tan do, nge nam sanma me pir go ne ter niji chujirgo tan no, nge no nambar tokbar go ne ter niji chujirgo tan no, nge no moba me pir go ne ter nye da Ternici çocuk gornum tanongina mumbur gone ternici çocuk gortano ngena kanza qargone ternici çocuk gortano ngena kanza mepir gone ternici çocuk gortano Nganan jikbe terni dang, dobe terni dang, ngena yobe terni dang, mebe terni dang, ngena dikshi ki terni dang, dimashi ki terni dang, ngena drangwe terni dang, drang mebe terni dang, ngena sangwe terni dang, sang mebe terni dang, ngena koril go terni dang, nganam nyan debe go terni dang, ngena jikten ji terni dang, ngena jikten len debe terni dang, ngena dochik gir go terni dang, ngana jirdang gir go terni dang, ngena oktami gir go terni dang, 자고랑에는 건강한 심한 얘기고 되니 공부고 내 주단 또 자고로 담진들 따때 맞다 비츠르데 시르비 바로도 심비츠르 있나 대랍 쇼치그 쇼치그 시베 대정 서발ар 그란데브 소 되니 정든디 라 자고로 존네 제르들 그또 소르도 정든데 카테 라라지 그득 비쪽 보고 그 추르방만들 다바 Gibir kirnab chumdindi tse tenyin la chirtar tarvarin gira tirkichi suradam chumdindi kinjagur jonna kirwalan tirkichi kwapsar don jagur karte lob din givarta lokchi ge tigzimd nibab jibib shangana tigo da yang shangwaran gira de shinchut shonzu da karwa chi toba tobaran gira jagur karte shanchu senhui tabi rigba Rigivum ganjik chukir namjang the mabzong wang flobrin hermana chuki pomrin gerwe marmi batarwa shandakago devena shanju sangwandala flabna shi chutamber tarte and tarmi bram manjero jawar shanju sangwan nyambani kongda chibr shiarte je ganjina semchin nyambani tang chum nyambani dang shanjib nyambani dang lomdong nyambani de nyambani jibote do shanju sangwa kongda chibr shao kangdo nyambani jibote do kongda 마치바 나 저메데 양 다가르메 브란 겨도 양 추지 당단나 잔주상과 생화 진보를 기ව금을 기व모 마르메 브르 타르번 겨데제 강제나 담질라 공조메 비셈당 시베무네 줄마바 남랑가른 맵시바다 바로 멀풍와다 대저서 백송바 담질 기바 연대 추 저보데 당단나를 기व금을 기व모 대도 마르메 브르 타르번 겨로 자호럽 잔주상과 강식기 Karwa Kangalong Kushimani, the Santi Jang Tamjaran Butcher, not the Gigante, Santi Jundan de Kangalong Kushimani, the Chu, the whatever Barave, Kanjir, number Taba Tamchu, Divim, Chu, the Jishang, Alabam, She, the Tana, Lan, Sum, Flagana, Don TV, Sonum Chiver, Keeper and your teacher, General Samakan, number Taba Dibi. Don Flappy Sunum Gi Pombodam Yambi Jimbadam, Surumdam, Sundidam, Zobadam, Surumdam, Sundidam, Santan, the Shirba, the Medo, Chujinam Shana, Shanship Senhua Gangalong of Shima, near the Mercury Chulab Zuba to procure to Shanship Senhua. Shanship Senhua Gangalong of Shima, Dunji, Shima, near no Laname Bashan, Shanship, the Shermer, Dober Gerd, or Tonsum Giton, Jimbo Jitan, comes Shua, to get on. Chuji chur namjanda la yerane shangchip to koja chembu gube de tamchip karab gyachi kor var korne tamchip jang karab gyachi la name bayan do shangchip to ngumber do san gyeran gyoro shangchip senhwa gang da nandan ji na chuji namjanda la ton che jang tertirim jebe chebe panyone che la sarva che jang geba chego Jahor testavena chujir namjanda la flapte shimitina chundo zonro shawo de tistar na kid marme ber tarwan gyoro de churmawa nishipo de to jondan de landir ko to sort of jondan de chujir gerbo jondan de gi jirk de kap zarwa devjan de gyogo sanji jim tadang sanji shinji lebi Devjan shikbibka lagbar raptab dribir gyogo, jamdan de giterki jibka abzarni jagru jonne gerbadan, shanju sangwa jimbo tedagdan, gerlong tedagdan, ladan, madan, lamayandan, chazadam jibin jitne yerang dip jamdan de somba la mumbro to do, bagbar nambar tamjib do ajibsha, toba tamjib jim dor zokso, yagar jim kambo, zanam jadan, mun barmadan, jichingi loza wandi ishi de, gerjan jide la papa wo.
Good. So I've just given you the full oral transmission of the Vaipulya Sutra of the Total Retention. So let's continue with our class today. In the previous class, we've already learned the story of Bhikshu Pure Life and Bhikshu Dharma, which were the stories of the previous life of Amitabha Buddha and Shakyamuni Buddha when they were still at the causal stage. At that time, Shakyamuni Buddha was the Bhikshu Dharma who appeared to had slandered the Dharma, and Amitabha at the time was a bhikshu who had led a pure life and whose name was Bhikshu Pure Life, and he was a great practitioner. But Bhikshu Dharma slandered Bhikshu Pure Life. Therefore, he endured lots of suffering in hell realm for many lifetimes and many kalpas, as well as was reborn as animals and endured lots of suffering. Even when he was reborn as a person, he was mute and he was poor, and that was the story. So after listening to that story, all the bodhisattvas was very sad, and they all made the aspiration in the future lifetime they will refrain from the double talk about the Dharma.
接下来呢
To continue,
讲20
the sutra says that then 100 bodhisattvas in the assembly rose from their seats. Upon hearing all the stories, at that time, 100 bodhisattvas rose from their seats,
坐垫就是站起来，然后呢就是他们都那个就是尤其做题啊
knelt on their right knees and cried out loud,
非常这个
shedding tears of sorrow. So everyone was extremely sad, and they were wailing.
就开始这个就是大家就流下眼泪，就是很伤心的，就是哭着。
And then
就是
the world-honored one,
释迦牟尼佛呢
knowing the reason, still asked these bodhisattvas. So he already knew the reason of the bodhisattvas crying. In fact, asking out of knowing, according to the Tattvasiddhi Shastra, it says that in the mundane world, the beings would ask questions even if they know the answer. But maybe out of some special reasons, they would still go and inquire. Similarly, the Buddha, though he's omniscient, he could completely understand and know everything, but for the sake of sentient beings, he would still ask questions. So Tattvasiddhi was translated by Kumarajiva into Chinese. It was composed by a Shramana from India, and mainly the text was to refute the truly existent and to convey the understanding of emptiness of phenomena and emptiness of self, but it is not included in the Tibetan version. Sometimes I do quote from it though. The Buddha already knows, but still he inquired the bodhisattvas, saying that, well, good men, why do you all wail miserably like this? And these bodhisattvas replied with one voice. If you recall, lots of the sutras would use that term, replied with one voice, such as in Kshitigarbha Sutra. There's also the usage of this description of how the bodhisattvas would reply with one voice. And they replied with one voice to the Buddha, saying that, world-honored one, we see in ourselves such as evil karma hindrances as well. When they reflect upon themselves, they also see that they had also done such hindrances They had also committed such slandering of the Dharma in the past. We also talked about it last time. The reason Bhikshu Dharma had fallen for a long period of time falling to the three lower realms for a long period of time is because he did not adjust his mind. He did not adjust his language, and for such reason he made grave misconduct, and for that reason he was reborn in lower realms for lifetimes. And at that time, in the present in front of Shakyamuni Buddha, the 100 bodhisattvas also investigated and found that they also had made such mistake. Whenever we reflect upon ourselves, we can also see that we had also made such misdeeds. And in the later part of this sutra, it also talks about the other aspects or the sub-branches of slandering the Dharma, and the further back it goes, the more severe the misconduct is, and easier to make those as well. For example, to say that one Dharma is more supreme than the other, that is also considered as slandering. If one were to say that this is to give the teachings to the Bodhisattva and the other one is to the Shravakas, that is slandering as well. According to Lamrim, there are lots of the teachings that's quoted from the Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of total retention. Like what we've studied yesterday, the misdeeds that's conducted by Bhikshu Dharma, he may have also discovered it by himself that indeed he was slandering the others with jealousy. But especially when the other Dharma teacher does not have any faults at all and was a great Dharma teacher, but for the personal agenda, for the benefits of himself and for the gaining of the 8 worldly dharmas, he slandered the other Dharma teacher, and that is quite severe. So the 100 bodhisattvas is contemplating on such kind of mistake and to try to investigate whether they had that as well. You should not think that only the 100 bodhisattvas have made such mistake, but I have never done such mistake. You should not think in such a way. You should rather again and again investigate on yourself. Have I ever made such misconduct just like Dharma, just like Bhikshu Dharma? Not contemplating in such a way that I have lots of right mindfulness, but the other person doesn't, and I am the most, I have the most faith and I have no arrogance, but the other one has. Anyhow, in such a way, if we were to communicate with the others, I think we would create lots of horrible negative karma. And once we recognize it, when it comes to a time that we actually could recognize it, we've already made such negative deeds. There are people who, after getting ordination, but have never studied Vinaya, then after a while, after they actually started studying Vinaya, they realized that they've already break their Vinaya, and then it's really too late. Similarly, whenever we study any sutras like this, each and every one of the Buddhists should study at the beginning of their path of studying the Dharma. And there are people who, after studying this Dharma, they still can't change much because they have lots of afflictions and they have lots of those kind of habits. But there are people who are not like that. They can actually use the knowledge to tame their mind stream. And I think for these group of people, they must have had great auspicious connections with the Dharma. That's why their virtuous deeds are easy to ripen in this lifetime. And for these kind of people, they can learn faster. The other day, I also said that this sutra should not be taught at the end. This sutra should be taught at the very beginning. I have taught the Dharma for 30 years, and we've studied for 30 years. And I think it seems that we are studying this teaching only now. we should really study it at the very beginning, especially later on if you can build Dharma institutions or some Dharma centers. You should study this sutra at the very beginning. Let you be lay practitioners or monastics, especially once you have the oral transmission, to study this at the first. That would be the best. At that time, the world-honored one spoke these words, "Indeed, indeed, in the past, you renounced family life in the Dharma of Dipankara Buddha. And in the past, you renounced the family life and were great practitioners. After the parinirvana of Dipankara Buddha, in fact, the bodhisattvas present in front of Shakyamuni Buddha were great bodhisattvas because they were renunciates in front of, during the time of Dipankara Buddha. After the parinirvana of Dipankara Buddha, there was a bhikshu called Knowledge Accumulation Bhikshu. And this bhikshu was a great bhikshu. At that time, the 100 bodhisattvas all slandered this bhikshu. For this reason, you have since been unable to see Buddhas. Throughout their living, their studying, they had never seen Buddhas between then till now. And they were not able to give rise to the Bodhi mind and unable to acquire dharanis and samadhis. Nowadays, I think during our practices, there are people who, even after a long period of time of practicing in retreat, they don't have any insights. They don't have any. They don't develop any kind of personal experience of dharanis or samadhis. And the reason behind that is most likely because they had slandered great masters or slandered the Dharma. And for that reason, they are not able to meet the Buddha. They're not able to generate or acquire dharani and samadhi, nor could they give rise to the Bodhi mind. According to the sutra required by Sabahu, it says that if there are people in the past life or in this lifetime cannot protect their own body, speech, and mind, and if they were to create lots of negative deeds, even if they engage in practice, they cannot gain accomplishment in the Dharma. So it would be very difficult for them, for such kind of person who had created such kind of negative deeds in their body, speech, and mind to generate or to accumulate any kind of accomplishment in this lifetime. So if you cannot generate renunciation, bodhicitta, or the non-dual wisdom, if you cannot see the bodhisattvas, then that must have something to do with your karmic obscuration. Therefore, we should definitely confess. There are people who tell me that I've been practicing in the monastery for a long time, but I could not generate any personal experience. And they may think that it is because the Dharma is not supreme, but the truth is the otherwise. There's a sutra translated by Bodhi Ritchie into Chinese. It's called the Sutra on Slandering the Dharma. It's not a very thick sutra. It's only about 1 volume or so. Inside that sutra, it says that there are people who practice for 7 years but have not generated any personal experience or insights at all, though they had built monasteries and had made offerings to the Sangha and created lots of meritorious actions. But because there was one king who made offering to a great bodhisattva, but these group of people started to slander this bodhisattva. And for this kind of karmic retribution, their practices cannot succeed. according to the Sutra on Slandering the Dharma, it says that if we were to see some Dharma teachers do not practice appropriately, we should not slander them. Don't even mention if we were just to hear something about it, if it's just a hearsay or just some speculation. If one were to slander the Dharma, then any kinds of insights won't arise. Therefore, whenever you have time, I encourage you to read into the Tripitaka. There is one volume inside of that Tripitaka. The sutra's name is called the Sutra on Slandering the Dharma. It is only in Chinese right now. It is not in Tibetan. I really want to translate it, but I've been busy, so I haven't translated yet. I think we should know what is slandering the Dharma. In fact, slandering the Dharma, slandering the Dharma teacher, slandering the Buddha, all of these, all of the teachings are very clearly stated in the Sutra on slandering the Buddha, rather. So whenever you have time, I really hope that you can read into these classical sutras. I had quoted from this sutra. Maybe it's not that clear, but if you had indeed slandered the Dharma, the Buddha, then that is quite severe, and you can find out what it is stated in the sutra whenever you have time. Anyhow, it says that even if you were to see the mistakes of the Dharma teacher, you should not speak it out. Don't even mention about if it's just a hearsay or speculation. Anyhow, slandering the Dharma teacher is slandering the Buddha.
那么荷兰呢，就是他们就是共同就是然后才能安住到菩萨道当中吧。后来可能他们忏悔就是他们共同修行呢。那么这样的话呢，就是大家都就入于这个菩提道当中就是那么佛陀告诉就是如等三男子就是赐那个仙界的最后佛哪里呢？就是你们才能获得这个无生法忍的就是在包括这个佛陀和还有那个就是什么990这个三界的三个这个佛面前呢是没办法的，只有最后一个佛面前呢才能得到无生法忍的。之后呢，就是过了3个阿僧祇劫，行持这个菩提道就最后才得到这个阿耨多罗三藐三菩提的。因此呢，就是如果这个三男子就见到菩萨呢，就是见到其他菩萨的时候呢，不应该生于彼此之心就是那么见到任何一个他这里的这个菩萨的话呢，实际上我们呢也可以理解成就是我们见到任何的人。
Therefore, good men, when bodhisattvas see other bodhisattvas, they should not think of self versus others. In fact, the bodhisattvas that's referred over here are the ones who had generated bodhicitta. All of us who's sitting here, all of our audience, we do chant the verses of generating bodhicitta every day before the classes. According to the perspective from Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the ones who had generated bodhicitta are the beginner bodhisattvas. So in our tradition, we do call the others as the old bodhisattva, senior bodhisattva, young bodhisattva. So we are all bodhisattvas. We're all beginner bodhisattvas on the path of Mahayana. We're not the first Bhumi bodhisattva. According to Venerable Gorimpa, in the explanation of Bodhisattva Charyavatara, he says that there are two types of bodhisattvas. One is a bodhisattva in terms of their view, and the other one is in terms of their action. The ones who had generated bodhicitta, though they are mundane beings, they are still bodhisattvas. So over here it says that when the bodhisattvas sees the other bodhisattvas, they should not have the thoughts of thinking of themselves versus the others. Instead, they should think that others are like sacred pagodas, like Buddhas. So whenever we see anybody, whenever we see anyone, we should see them as pagodas. We should see them as Buddhas. Hence, when bodhisattvas see other bodhisattvas, bodhisattvas, they should not have discriminatory thoughts, considering others as non-Buddhas. We should not think in such a way that, the other person is not a bodhisattva, the other person is not a Buddha, not a pagoda. The other person is full of negative deeds and full of negative karmas. In fact, the people only appeared in such a way to us. Some of them appear in this way and some in the other. According to the sutras, the bodhisattvas would appear in many kinds of manifestations, and some of them would manifest in a magnificent way, and some would manifest in an ugly way. Some of them would manifest in a rich way, and some would manifest in a way that may appear to be suffering in poverty. Some of them would appear as Brahmins, some of them would appear as Shramanas, and some as prostitutes, hunters, and butchers. So we should probably think that the Buddhists can be viewed as bodhisattvas, but for non-Buddhists, there's no way that we can see them as bodhisattvas. But according to the sutra, it says that to see everyone as bodhisattvas, whomsoever you see, the ones who have faith or do not have any faith at all, we should see them as Buddhas. In this way, we will not create negative deeds. Some people may think that, well, I can see the good spiritual friend as a Buddha, but the ones around them, I cannot think of them as Buddhas. In fact, that is not right. We constantly say that in front of the Buddhas, they're all Buddhas. In front of the bodhisattvas, to the bodhisattvas, they're all bodhisattvas. To the mundane beings, they're all mundane beings. Therefore, we should generate this sacred outlook. We should not think of the others as non-Buddhas. If one were to generate any of these discriminating thoughts, then it is self-harming, it is self-deceiving. You should not view the others as mundane beings. You should not view the others as that they're all inferior. In fact, if you were to see the others in such a way, in a discriminating way, it is to discriminating the Buddha. It is to create lots of negative deeds, according to the Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch. Because even though the other person may not seem like they had generated a bodhicitta, but because in their mind stream there is already a seed of Buddha nature, therefore we should not discriminate even the smallest spark, as the smallest spark can become a great fire. For the same reason, we should not discriminate even the new beginner bodhisattvas. And that is why you should accept and uphold this instruction and make this aspiration. Without alienating thoughts, you should join others in harmony. So if you cannot see the others as the Buddha, if I held the view that the newly resolved bodhisattvas would be less than a Buddha, I would be deceiving innumerable Samkhyas of Buddhas of the present in worlds in the 10 directions. In the Tibetan version, it is said that this is the aspiration of the immovable Buddha, and it's simply quoting such aspiration, but the translation of Dharmaraksha is similar to the translation over here in this version. Anyhow, what it means is that we should not discriminate the others. We should rather join hands with the others to make aspiration that from now onwards I will not see the others as non-Buddhas. And for such, if I were to do so, I would be lying to all the Buddhas. That is quite a horrifying act. So we should make the aspiration like such. We should use a sacred outlook or pure mind. In this way, we should practice. Otherwise, we would generate great dualistic thoughts. We would usually say this or that, and we would make lots of discriminations. But from now on, we should be clear, whomsoever appear in front of you in whichever form they are, temporarily and ultimately speaking, they can all become a cause of becoming a Buddha. They are just upholding different manifestations as bodhisattvas. Therefore, good men, if bodhisattvas can acquire dharanis and samadhis in the future, in a world of the five tributaries, it will all be by virtue of the awesome power of the Buddhas. Hence, good man slandering a Dharma master is no different from slandering a Buddha. It seems a little abrupt in terms of the context, but we can understand it in such a way that, good man, if you were to slander a Dharma teacher, it is no other than slandering a Buddha. Why is that so? Slandering a Dharma teacher is the same as slandering a Buddha. In the Tibetan version, there is a sutra. It's called the Undefiled Space Sutra. There is no direct translation of that. But inside that sutra, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, in fact, the Buddha does not appear in front of each and every sentient being, but the true spiritual teacher would appear in front of many sentient beings and give teachings to them, so to plant the seed of liberation in their mind stream. Therefore, we should respect the spiritual teacher even more than the Tathagata. Do you understand that now? According to the Sutra of the Undefiled Space, the Buddha told Ananda, in fact, the Tathagata does not appear in front of all sentient beings, but a spiritual teacher would not only appear in front of the sentient beings, but also give them teachings and plant the seeds of liberation. Therefore, we should respect the spiritual teachers more than even the Tathagata. For this reason, we should be very clear that Shakyamuni Buddha and other Buddhas, during their times, they had already passed, and we cannot see them because they already departed for over 2,500 years and does not appear in front of everyone. However, there are many spiritual teachers giving teachings in front of sentient beings in different worlds, in different eras. And for such a reason, they're just like the Tathagata because they give us the teachings of the Dharma and plant the seeds of liberation. From this level, then the Tathagata and the Dharma teacher really is of no difference. Therefore, slandering the teacher is just like slandering the Buddha. But if we were to make offering and revere as well as make prostration to the Dharma teacher, is no other than making prostration and revere the Buddha. In the Tibetan tradition, we take the 4 refuges rather than the 3. We take refuge of the teacher, of the Buddha, of the Dharma, and of the Sangha. And some people would ask, this is not reasonable to take refuge with the teacher at the very beginning. But indeed, it is very appropriate because according to the Chinese Buddhism, it also is recorded in the sutra, according to the sutra of the Buddha's teaching on the decisive dharani. It says that if one were to slander the Dharma, that person is to slander the Tathagata. If one were to make offering to the Tathagata, one should make offering to the Dharma teacher. If one were to revere the Tathagata, one should follow the teachings of the Dharma teacher. If one were to prostrate to the Tathagata, one should make such prostrations to the Dharma teacher. So, in such a way, we should contemplate that if you were to slander the Dharma teacher, it is just like you were to slander the Buddha. We say that we should see the teacher as the Buddha. In fact, it is of the same meaning. If you often slander a certain teacher, even if you never studied from him, but slander that person, then it is of no difference than slandering the the Buddha. Of course, if you were to slander the ones who have given you the teachings, such kind of misconduct would be even worse. Such kind of karmic retribution would be even worse. And then, good men, after the Buddha's parinirvana, if there is a Dharma master who can well expound the Dharma according to the preference of the listeners and is able to have Bodhisattva study the Mahayana doctrine and have the multitude feel as little joy as a hair and even shed one tear, know that it will all be by virtue of the spiritual power of the Buddha. So if a Dharma teacher like such who expounds the Dharma really well, and people would generate joyfulness and generate confidence, and maybe the hair would stand up on the body and the tears rolling down the cheeks. In fact, that person have received the blessings of the Buddha. Maybe tears is not very often, but if so, most of the tears of mundane beings are because of their selfishness, because of the suffering that caused by their selfishness. However, if one were to even tear up during the time of contemplating and listening to the Dharma, even if it's just a one drop of tear, such merit is great. Majority of our teardrops are shed because of our selfishness, such as the passing of our parents and so on. But whenever we hear the stories of the Buddha, even if it's just one tear, then it could accumulate the merit and provisions for hundreds and thousands of kalpas. According to a sutra of Nashin Bhikshu, a king asked him, if one were to tear up during listening to a sutra, and one also tears up when the parents pass away, what's the difference? Then the bhikshu answered, saying that the tears of the passing of the tears shed at the time of the passing of the parents is a selfish emotion. It does not have any value. But when you shed even one tear during the listening of the Dharma, the merit is great. When Pontsukul Rinpoche gave teaching of the biography of the 8 great bodhisattvas, he appeared to be really heartbroken and was tearing up a lot. Pontsukul Rinpoche also said that he wanted to give teachings of the extensive biography of Shakyamuni Buddha, but he said that if he were to give teachings of that, he would cry every day. It was around the time of 50s and 60s, Pontsukul Rinpoche would read the extensive biography of Shakyamuni Buddha of Vaipulya Rinpoche, and at the time he was still hurting during the 50s and 60s. And he would cry a lot, and his eyes would be swollen. So Pontsukul Rinpoche said that if I were to give teachings on that, I would definitely cry. And for me, as a senior, if I were to cry in the class, it doesn't look very dignified. Therefore, he didn't. That's what he said. And later, he said that later on, Pontsukul Rinpoche did give teachings on that, and he did cry a lot in the class. It is definitely a great manifestation, and we were very much encouraged by his faith as well, and we generated great faith towards the Shakyamuni Buddha. Back in 2002, when I was having bad health, and for 5 months I cut off all my connections with the outside world, so to speak, and I was focusing on the translation of extensive biography of Shakyamuni Buddha, and at that time I generated a great great confidence to the Buddha, to Shakyamuni Buddha. I didn't cry that much, but I did a little, especially during translation. Some of the stories was very touching when it talks about how the Buddha accumulated so many lifetimes of provisions and merit, and made lots of offering and give even his life so to receive the Dharma. At the time of translation, I was staying in the city of Xiamen and in a hospital. The nurse who really disliked me, and she was crying a lot at that time as well. I asked her, "Are you crying because I'm leaving the next day?" She said, "No, I am not crying because of that," but she was crying a lot. Maybe she was having some relationship issues at the time. That nurse really didn't like me. Whenever she gave me shots, she would give me really painful shots. Anyhow, whenever we read the biography of the Buddha, listening to the stories of the previous great masters, if you could even shed one tear, it is a meaningful tear. It is of great meaning.
下面
Suppose a fool who is not a bodhisattva but claims to be a bodhisattva maligns a true bodhisattva and his actions. It is, if that kind of bodhisattva who's not a bodhisattva but maligns a true bodhisattva and in his actions, even speaking these words, this is quite common nowadays. There are some of those charlatan gurus or the fake spiritual teachers. In these kind of situations, I think it's quite important to know that, including all of you who's sitting here, there are people who would take the so-called gurus to propagate the teachings in the cities. Originally, they are not gurus, they're not qualified, but then they would go to different cities and make different propagations and slowly become a guru. Originally, they probably don't even know how to give teachings, but slowly they would get a crowd who would promote him even more. This is of negative deeds. We should definitely investigate. We should observe the spiritual friends before we study from them. Without such, it is indeed also slandering the Dharma and slandering the Buddha. Maybe initially you wanted to introduce them to the others, but if you're the first one who introduced such charlatans, that kind of negative karma is quite grave. Some of the foolish ones, they don't know anything, but they pretend or try to let others to put up an act. This is even worse of an act to slander the Buddha. They would say such words, saying that what does he know? What does he understand? And the Buddha told Maitreya, saying that, I remember in the past in Jambudvipa, when I was learning to be a bodhisattva, I loved and treasured the Dharma. For the sake of even one verse or one stanza, I abandoned my head, eyes, wife, and throne, which I cherish. Why would I do that? Why would I give up all of those for the Dharma? To seek the Dharma, as if it is because I was seeking the Dharma, and even to seek for a Dharma that is as short as one verse and one stanza, it is worth to give up everything, to give up one's head, eyes, wife, elephant throne. We can see that Shakyamuni Buddha indeed gave up everything when he was seeking the Dharma during the causal stage. He would carve out the flesh on his body and give it to the other beings. He would cross the oceans of fire and mountains of knives to seek the Dharma. The reason of giving up so much is to seek the Dharma. To seek the Dharma, everything is worthy, is valuable. To practice aesthetic actions, to sacrifice for the Dharma, to make offering for the Dharma, all of such are worthwhile. So I think all of us who are sitting here in the winter, it is quite cold. I'm sure that you have lots of difficulties in your living, in your livelihood. I see that the young ones or the seniors, everyone is encountering some difficulties, especially all of you who are sitting here. If you are staying at home, I think you would, if you actually would stay in your hometown or at your home, the weather, the provisions, and the resources would be much better than if you were to stay here. But I see that you all give up all of those kind of resources and provisions. What's the goal? What's the purpose of giving up all of those? It is not to take a tour over here. It is not to enjoy happiness and peace over here, or those happiness livelihood. It's not that. It is to seek for the Dharma. There are people who can easily receive the Dharma, maybe because of their past connections to the Dharma is very good. They don't have too much great difficulties in terms of their livelihood, and they can get along with others, and they're healthy. They're very healthy both physically and mentally, and they don't have much of the obstacles. And there are people who enjoy such kind of easy way of receiving the Dharma, and there are people who don't. They have all kinds of obstacles. There are people who have all kinds of obstacles when it comes to seek for the Dharma. In whichever way, whichever situation you are, since you are staying here for 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, and after this, after studying, after spending all this time over here, you should at least completed studying a few sutras, a few shastras. You should contemplate that in my lifetime, though I had been lost in the cities, though I had squandered my life without the right view, and I may have carried out misconduct without knowing the right from the wrong. But from now on, I will live in the place as if I live in the Pure Land, because I've stayed in a place that is just like a Pure Land, and I've already sought the teachings of the Dharma. These are the things that's very joyful. I heard from a Buddhist today who told me the story that there was once a lay practitioner. He said that he had lots of problems, and he was very anxious, and whenever that happens he would smoke, and after smoking cigarettes he would feel a little bit better. But when cigarettes doesn't work, he would drink. After alcohol he would feel a little bit drowsy, and then he would feel a little bit comfortable. That's how he would cope with anxiety, and that's how he had become now. He said that before he get back to the city life, he was good. He recited books and the sutras, and everyone, when they stayed over here in this Pure Land like center, they probably never would imagine, they they could turn into such a way. But everyone's future, everyone's karma would change, and we can never really know what would happen. I didn't scold him. I said, it's okay, slowly you can change, because drinking and smoking is not good for health, but slowly it would get better. Anyhow, everyone's karma would change, and as long as your kind heart and kind thoughts does not change, then maybe things would get better. As for the fools who seek only fame, benefits, and worship, confident in their own limited capacity, they do not go to one who imparts the Dharma of the Tathagata to hear and receive the true Dharma. Sometimes some people, because they enjoy fame, they are arrogant, and the group of fools who seek for the eight worldly dharmas, they in fact don't have the interest to go to places where the true Dharma is taught. And the Buddha said, Maitreya, if the slanderers and the slandered unite in harmony, let them be monastics or the lay practitioners, if everyone unite in harmony, they will be able to uphold and circulate my Dharma. They will be able to make my Dharma prosperous. If the two groups are in conflict and in dispute, the true Dharma will not prevail. So slandering the others, it is really not good for either side. According to the Sutra of the 100 karmic stories, there is a story. It says that there was once a teacher. He has 2 disciples, and the teacher's foot constantly is in pain. Therefore, he would ask one disciple to massage his foot, and the other disciple does not feel happy about it. He thinks that, why not me? Why don't you ask me to massage? And once, when the other disciple went outside, he used this opportunity to smash the foot of the teacher with a stone. And since then, the teacher lost his foot, and both of them have lost the object of giving massage to gain merit. And in such a way, they don't need to compete with one another anymore. This is the practice of the foolish ones. In fact, people who do not get well together with jealousy, nobody could benefit from such situation. There is a saying, a worldly saying, if you were to drag the others into the river, you yourself might also fall into the river. So if you were to slander certain Dharma teachers, slander certain competitor, or slander someone you don't like, then in this way, at the end of it, you may be harming yourself. And the Dharma won't be prosperous. Your practice will not be successful either. And then over here it says Ajita. Ajita is the Sanskrit version of the name of Maitreya. So over here the Buddha said that Ajita, I'm not quite sure why some places he says Maitreya, sometimes he says Ajita. Anyhow, it says that over here the Buddha says that Ajita, you should observe those who can malign the Dharma. You should observe the ones who likes to slander the others. For these kind of people, they cannot succeed in practicing the Dharma. In fact, whenever you see anything that is inappropriate, if you're not the disciplinary, or if you're not someone who manages the Sangha, you should just leave it alone. You shouldn't pay special attention to it. Otherwise, if you were to think that you're practicing something good, but maybe that is just a road to lead you to the three lower realms, and it would get hard for you to get liberated. According to the Mahayana Avatar Shastra, it says that the misdeed of slandering the Dharma is much worse than the 5 inexpiables, because the 3 lower realms would, because once falling into the 3 lower realms, it will be hard to get liberated, and it will suffer for a long period of time. Everyone should generate faith towards liberation, but there are times beings would have afflictions that would pop up. All kinds of suffering would generate because of such afflictions. However, you should know that the Buddha nature, everyone has a Buddha nature, and everyone's nature is of such, it is not evil. Everyone's nature is good. There are some dark clouds that might obscure such wisdom, but with confession and by chanting mantras, you can definitely dispel all the obstacles through practice. Sometimes you may get a little lost, and sometimes make a little mistake, but eventually you'll be able to get back to your original state and gain liberation, and we should generate a great faith of it. There are times that people would practice good and sometimes practice the vice and generate negative karma. Sometimes we would say that, well, I get lazy today, but the lazy time is not that long. Majority of the time, I'm quite diligent. And to compare the time of chanting the sutra, there are maybe 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 hours, but the time of my slandering the Dharma is not that long. Then maybe that is quite hopeful to see it from this way. To practice the virtuous deeds, I think Yama actually knows better. Otherwise, if I practiced good for a whole life, and if I were to practice a little bit of misdeeds and make me to fall into 3 lower realms, that is not very fair. Each of the ordinary beings would generate afflictions once in a while and would practice vice, but we should try to practice the good, and that has lots of power, and we should stop over here.